All right, guys, welcome to another episode of GC Talks. David Villa here, and you are in for a treat. Hopefully, as always, I have Pastor Greg Basch. Greg is the campus leadership pastor at Elevation Church in North Carolina. That's right. Listen, we're going to talk about faith. We're going to talk about leadership. You don't want to miss the next few minutes. Buckle your seatbelt. All right, so I am here with Pastor Greg, and Pastor, you know, I want to jump right into this, man, because you and I had a chance to talk a little bit, and I know you've listened to the other episodes and how we've talked to some of the business owners that are out there with specifically regarding their faith and marketplace and what they see, and I know you deal with a lot of business owners, CEOs, leaders in general, and so we're coming out of a time. Man, it's just been crazy. I think, I'm 50, and I'll be honest with you, I would have got it wrong if somebody would have ever asked me ahead of time if I would have lived through what we've just gone through. But here's the thing that I feel in my spirit, and I want to ask you about this. I feel an anticipation. I really do. I've always viewed in business obstacles, as opportunities, and I really feel like that the kingdom, the church, the marketplace, we're really looking at an opportunity right now to take some ground. And so I want to ask you, when it comes to what you're hearing, with the owners and business owners and leaders that are navigating their way out of this, what are you sensing? What's on the ground there, with your influence?
Yeah, it's so interesting. I feel like when life gets hard and when the world gets crazy and the pressure is on, it really reveals a lot about our foundations that we've built for ourselves. And it reveals a lot about our priorities and the ways that we lead our lives and how we make our decisions. And so I think the past few years have really forced us to reckon with the ways in which we have kind of segmented out our spirituality and our experience with God from the rest of our lives. And so I work in a church, I work in ministry, but I talk to a lot of people who don't work in ministry. They love the Lord, but they're struggling to understand, how do I integrate my faith? How do I integrate what I'm hearing on Sunday or my experience with church with the rest of what I do? And I think the simplest way that it kind of boils down is, where are you leading from as a leader? I think the way the world tends to operate is we tend to lead from a place of ego, which would be our selfish desires, which would be selfish ambition, which would be, reacting and responding just to what culture is telling us in any given moment. And so I think the better way and the way that God would want us to lead in all our different spheres is leading from a place of humility, leading from the soul, not the ego, leading from the overflow of what God has been speaking to us. And I don't necessarily have, the answer or the solution to how we do that, but I think that's the path that a lot of leaders are having to walk right now, is that pursuit of integration between their spirituality and their leadership.
I love that. So I want to talk about that a little bit, because amen. Let me just say this. And so being somebody who his traditional ministry, then traditional business as a Christian, and now traditional or a non-traditional, unconventional ministry / business. That's where I've been. And that is, we're so used to, I think, the separate, the separation, so to speak, of like Sundays and Wednesday and church and small groups and business, right? My job. The reality is we're put in a position where in this season, I think God's saying, look, it's never been separate. It's never been my intention. And now, not only that, I've given you a blueprint. That's been in my heart, the word blueprint. Matter of fact, I wrote a Bible plan on it, on YouVersion recently. And I really feel that more than ever right now, that God is giving blueprints to business owners and leaders. And it's kind of the Solomon effect, if that makes sense. I think where the world, even if they have money, they don't have answers. And I think they're going to take note, and that's the anticipation that I sense in this season, and and that's what I got out of what you just said as well. Like we're having to kind of walk the talk, so to speak, out in that Monday through Friday in that marketplace. Have you seen? I mean, are you seeing God move in incredible ways in the businesses that are part of the church you pastor and part of the your circle?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, everyone's having a different experience, and maybe some are doing better than others. But where I see people really having a transformative experience and really stepping into a new level of God's favor in their life and maybe in their business, I'm seeing it comes from this place of humility. So I love that you brought up Solomon. I know you're a big fan of Solomon. And I am too. And I've been thinking a lot about that moment where Solomon is visited by God in a dream, and God asks him, what do you want me to give you?
Yeah.
And Solomon, he ultimately asks for wisdom, which I think is a beautiful thing to ask for and to seek out. And that's been really convicting my heart this whole year. But the way that Solomon starts in his conversation with God is he first says, I'm just a little child. Therefore, would you give me wisdom so that I have discernment to lead? And it's so interesting. He presents himself to God as a little child, but he wasn't a little child. He was a man. And in some ways, he was already wise. His father David had called him wise prior to this moment.
Right.
And so it's not that he was literally a child, but he was posturing and positioning himself in a place of humility and admitting to God that I can't figure this all out on my own. In my own strength, in my own human wisdom, I don't have all the answers. And that's such a powerful place to be. It's such a challenging place to put ourselves because it requires laying down our ego and our pride and all the great things that we'd like to say about ourselves. But Solomon's gift of wisdom, and then all the great things that came after that, the influence and all of it, it started from him humbling himself before God. And so I love when I see business leaders, especially ones who have been successful, still leading and living out of a place of humility and not allowing their success to go to their head or to overinflate the way that they see themselves. If you can stand in the midst of success, and I think you model this well, David, and still be humble and still say, I don't have all the answers. I don't have it all figured out. I still need God to give me something. Otherwise, I can't do this. That's when God tends to show up most. God doesn't work well with people who think they've got it all figured out. And so I think that was the secret blessing of the past few years of so many things being turned upside down, is it exposed in us all those places where we couldn't figure it out on our own. And if we respond well to that, there's a blessing in it.
It's crazy how as you were answering that and talking, what came to my mind is he's going to get us there, whether we want to or not. Meaning, there's an easy way to do it, and then there's a more difficult way to do it. And there's been times in my life where that humility might have been the go-to, but there's also times where I didn't act like Solomon. And I think that many are listening right now where Solomon. I don't know if that would have been, in all the seasons of my life, I don't know if that would have been the answer to the prayer if God would have given me that prayer.
Right.
But I can tell you in this season, there's been, what God's been doing is positioning. I think it's been something where, when you ask and you begin to do things and then you begin to ask and then something doesn't work, and all of a sudden he gets you to the place where only he can do this, and you're positioned in a place of vulnerability. And he's like, all right, now will you let me move in this? And, it's a good place to be, but it can take longer than we like it. If I've gotten there faster than I've gotten there slower, and it's a lot less painful when you let God do it. So that's kind of something that's interesting when you were answering that question. That's what I started thinking of. It's not it is an ego thing, I think sometimes, but when we're weak, then that's when the strength of God shows up. And, I was thinking about something the other day, and I ask you this is, we have a few more minutes here, a couple more minutes. I was in the line of Starbucks, and this is a few months ago, actually. But my wife and I, And I was looking in the drive-through, Pastor, and there was this piece of paper up that was literally handwritten. It had Monday through, all the days, Monday through Sunday. And it said, to be determined, the hours of operation to be determined on every day except for Tuesday and Wednesday. And it said 2 p.m. to 10 p.m. And by the way, mind you, I'm in a line of like 20 cars. So there's no shortage of demand on coffee. And I'm like, they don't have the answers. I'm like, they have the money, but they don't have the answers because they can't tell their customers their hours of operation on 5 of the 7 days. And on 2 days, they're not open until 2 p.m. Well, I have coffee, I need coffee before 2 p.m. So, it's just something that came into my mind that it doesn't mean that you're the richest. It doesn't mean that God's going to bless you where you're going to have more money than someone else, but you might have more answers because you're tapped into the one who has the answers. And what do you think about that in this season? Do you see the church being positioned, the marketplace being positioned to really move in the area of business in this season like never before?
Yeah, I think so. And I think it comes back to those foundations for our lives, those foundations for our motivations and our decision making and all that. And, to go back to our friend Solomon, he's such an interesting case study because he's regarded historically as the wisest man in the world. And yet he spent his whole life in the pursuit of wisdom. And that's what the whole book of Ecclesiastes is about, is his search for wisdom. And ultimately his realization that he can't get to the destination. Even though he's already the wisest man in the world, he still has to walk this pathway of seeking it out. And I think the key point is that wisdom comes from God. And the more we shift into understanding and living our lives out of that reality, knowing that wisdom is not something that I can ever fully attain. It's a pursuit, it's a process, and it leads me towards God. So to your point about, hey, sometimes you're not going to have the answers, but the one who will have the answers. And if our goal is to get to the point where we know everything and we have all the answers on our own, we will always fall short. Solomon found that out. But when our goal is to always be pursuing the one who has the answers, he will always provide what we need along the way. He will align us with his purposes. And in a lot of cases, he will pour out blessing and favor and success over the things that we're doing. And I think that's really exciting when that happens. It doesn't always happen that way. It's not that, following God always results in wealth building or influence building or anything like that, but God can and will use those things as it aligns with his purpose in the world. So I love seeing that happen, and I love seeing it happen more and more beyond the 4 walls of the church. Like we talked about at the beginning, is God's plan for creation permeates every corner of it. It permeates the workplace, it permeates the business world. The church should certainly be a catalyst and be an influence in all of it, but we can't keep it within the church. It has to flow out. It has to flow into the community. It has to touch the dark places and the unreached places in our societies, both right here around the corner, wherever we are, Tampa, I'm in North Carolina, and across the world. And so it's really exciting to see more and more leaders walk this path in the same way that you've walked it, in the same way that Solomon walked it, and to see God using that influence to make an impact.
Man, I'm going to leave it with that. Man, thank you so much, Pastor, for hanging out with us today, man. Great words. I know it's going to encourage a lot of folks, and thank you so much, man. I really appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, David. I'm a big fan now, but been tuning in and got the app and everything. So I think it's really awesome what you guys are building, and I'll keep tuning in.
Thank you, man. All right, I want to thank Pastor Greg for hanging out with us. What an amazing interview. Hopefully you got something out of that. Make sure you reach out and tell him how much you enjoyed that episode. Listen, I promise you this, if you apply the principles that just were talked about, you're not only flourish in business, in leadership, but also in your walk of faith. I'll see you next time on GC Talks.